Я подтверждение ситуации передаю настройку. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, COVID-19 comrades, we are back with another episode of the Talking Lead AK Corner. Season 2, Episode 7, and we got a good one for you this month. We're going to be talking about sighting in your AK-47, how to zero your AK-47. And as usual, I've brought in people who are smarter than me to talk about this. So I'm just like you guys. It's like you AK Corner listeners. I'm learning here too, and I'm picking topics that are going to help me, and hopefully that they're going to be beneficial to you as well. If you didn't get an opportunity, make sure you go to last month's episode, and we took listener questions. So it was a kind of a free-for-all. Made a post on social media, had you guys ask your questions, anything, everything, and we had a panel lined up, but due to this, God, I hate to say it, man, this made-up freaking pandemic that we've got going on, I think people are blowing it way out of proportion, but that's just me. A lot of them dropped off, so we had our resident expert, Brian Keeney, joining us. And like last episode, Brian's going to be joining us this episode. Brian, welcome in.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here again.
Well, I'm glad you made it, and I'm glad you're coronavirus free. Apparently, I mean, I don't know how many people I've talked to. I mean, it's dozens and dozens of personal people that I know, and I've asked, do they know anybody personally who has had the virus? And unanimously, it has been no. It's always, well, a friend of a friend told me that such and such had it. So,
yep. It's starting to get a little weird.
I think it's been weird from the very beginning. But regardless, I mean, we're doing what we're supposed to. We're pushing through, but yet at the same time, we're keeping one eye open as to what the left hand's doing over there, as the right hand is telling us this kind of bullshit.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that the right hand is much better than the left hand at the moment. Everybody seems to like to grab power in a calamity, and it's not looking good for most folks in government as to their behavior.
Yeah, it's not, and I think a lot of their true colors are being shown right now. So hopefully people are awake and watching and taking note. Yep. But
totally.
That's for another show. I think we talked about it a little bit on a show a little bit earlier, but also joining us, we've got regular to the show, to the AK Corner, and to the regular show, Talking Lead Podcast. We've got our good buddy Jay Dressler down there in Florida representing Century Arms today, the presenting sponsor of the Talking Lead AK Corner. Welcome in, Jay.
Hey, thanks for having us again. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, man, glad you could make it. I'm glad Adam cut you free from your overload of duties. I've heard that the firearms industry isn't hurting from this pandemic. How are you guys faring?
For the exception of working from home, factories up and running, imports are continuing. We have people working basically normal schedules. There hasn't been any redirection of labor or anything like that. So we're basically buying and shipping as usual.
Very good. And this is something I want to talk about too, is the ammo sales. I've seen a lot of posts about how the consumer feels like the companies are gouging them right now with the prices. A 5.56 round is now $1 a round or more, and then it varies from there with the 9 and all the other. But across the board, I think we've seen an increase in the consumer price of ammo, but that's due to real increase in price on the manufacturer's side. It's not a made-up fictional price that they're just throwing on there to try to gouge the consumer. Resources are harder to get now with a lot of the shipping, and other companies that manufacture some of the parts have been shut down. That just across the board is going to increase prices. And then, of course, like you said, you guys are probably working even harder than you normally do, trying to work from home and trying to keep up with the demand. That puts extra hours in, which is extra cost, and it just universally makes things more expensive. So I think for the time being, we're going to see an increase in ammo for a while now.
I think that may traditionally be true with pull through from your retail stores coming from the distributors. Distributors basically have a good supply, at least from what they're purchasing from us for Red Army Standard ammunition. Our supplies are doing pretty well, and our distributors who have pulled through that product were basically first on board as soon as consumer demand started to increase. Mm-hmm. So, but we're continuing to import ammunition, and as long as we're importing it, then regular folks should be able to, go to wherever it is that they buy and get what they need.
And this pandemic isn't just in America; it's worldwide. So this is affecting manufacturers in other countries. So where you're getting your distributions from, I'm sure that they're affected in some manner by this as well. Okay, Brian. So you brought a special guest to join us today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce Pete to the Leadhead Brigade?
Yeah, I've been a customer of Pete's for maybe 5 years, known him for 3 or 4, and he makes great quality ammunition and is quite the precision shooter. And Pete, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. Like Brian said, I've been in the industry pretty much all my life. Started, with my family's company, Corbon Ammunition. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of that. And I've been in the industry for, like I said, all my life. And I was in law enforcement for 14 years. Did a lot of fun stuff in that. Did a little bit of stuff overseas for some precision shooting stuff, actually in the country of Georgia, which is, essentially Russia. They'd probably kill me if I made that comparison, but yeah, I've been in the industry for a long time. This is my passion and my love, and started Defiant Munitions after I left Corbon, and we make, high-end self-defense, solid copper expanding rounds for hunting and self-defense.
Very cool. We were super excited to have you on joining us today. I know that you're going to have a lot to contribute to today's topic, which is zeroing in the AK-47.
Yeah, I hope so.
So, Brian, the AK-47, a Russian-designed rifle. You were telling us a story beforehand, kind of the history on how they came up with designing or the design for the AK-47 sights. Talk about that.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of calculus that goes into determining how a bullet drops over distance. And, of course, they knew about calculus in the 40s. They knew about it in the 1600s. But
it's been around a minute, hasn't it?
Yeah, computing it was another story. And so they did the smart thing and took empirical measurements of, just imagine a gun placed horizontally, not that it really matters, and then just moving a target from 25 or 50 yards out to 1,000. And of course, you'd have to tip it up. But let's say you put it on the edge of a cliff, okay? And you shoot out over the edge of this cliff and you measure how far the bullet drops. And then you figure out the corresponding angle that you'd need to move the gun to have it shoot flat that entire distance. So once they figured that out, they could make a ramp that is on every AK-47 out there. If you lift up the leaf sight, there's a funny shaped ramp underneath there, and that's actually what we call an analog computer. And you never knew you had a computer on your AK until right now. But what's going on is that depending on where you move that the cross slide there, it hits a different part of that ramp that is doped out for. It literally is the dope chart for the AK-47. And I've got the original Russian blueprints for the AKM, and there's this beautiful graph that somebody hand drew with a bunch of X measurements and Y measurements for what that profile needs to look like in order for the bullet to hit on target. Now, Pete knows this data way better than I do, but at 1,000 yards, the embodied energy in an AK round is not exciting, and it's not accurate, and the drop has got to be something like 40 or 50 feet or something like that. So, people should not expect to be hitting stuff out at 100 or 1,000 yards with any accuracy with an AK. But the reason they put that in was for volley fire. So if you can imagine getting 100 dudes to basically shoot their AKs as if they were mortars, plunging fire down onto an enemy position where you're just going to coat the ground in lead. That's what those long-range markings are for on the AK. So there's the historical reason behind those two.
Yeah, Brian, as you were saying, the drop out to 1,000 on an AK, using like a Red Army standard 124 grain FMJ, you're roughly 57 MOA. I would have to do calculation to figure that out in inches or feet, but that's a whole lot.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense.
So we've got our sight. So that's a good place to start on our sight. So let's just talk about the rear sight there on the AK-47. So you've got the rear leaf, and that rear leaf has got a mechanism. What's that mechanism called that slides up and down there?
I'm going to invent a name and call it the cross slide, but I have no idea what the actual name for that thing is.
Do you know what it is, Jay?
You know what? Nomenclature probably varies.
Okay.
I'm gonna,
I didn't know if there was
I'm gonna go with Brian on that.
Okay. I haven't seen anything yet. So the little slide you've got on there, and that slide is going to be moving on little tick marks that you've got marked up and down there, and it starts with a at the very bottom. We're going to look the very front here. And it's either a P, or is that the pi symbol? Would you say that is?
Exactly.
Or the people mark is what Jay calls it. P's for people.
Yeah, I like to refer to it as the P for people.
Yeah. And then it goes up, and you see a 1, you see a 2, you see a 3, and the evens are on the left, the odds are on the right, and those are meters. So that 1 is 100 meters, 2 is 200 meters, 3 300 meters, so on and so forth. And depending on which company you got, which brand you've got, it could go all the way up to 10, which would be 1,000 meters. The one I'm looking at right now, I think this one came off of Palmetto State Armory, and it goes to 8. I know the Visca goes to 10. It's got 1,000 on it. But those will vary, but those are meters. Those aren't yards, so you need to know that. And then, as Brian said, that little analog computer you've got there, as you move that up, that's going to move your leaf higher and higher and higher. So as you're going out to longer distances, that's what that adjustment is for. And that's your rear sight. You guys have anything else to add to the rear sight? All right, so we've got that. So we're going to move up to the front post sight now. And who wants to hit the front post sight? Tell us the parts of the front post sight.
Sure, I can handle that. So there's the tower itself, and then there's a drum, the front sight post drum that you press back and forth with the front sight adjustment tool. And you need one that they didn't give the soldiers in their cleaning kit. There's a front sight tool that adjusts elevation, but not one that adjusts windage. And the story that I've heard is that they didn't want anybody who wasn't an officer mucking with that thing. Right. And so it's pressed in there. And so initially, and basically the first time you ever touch the gun is the only time that you need to really mess with it. But you press it back and forth to get your windage adjust. That's the only windage adjust on the stock AKM. And then there's a vertical elevation screw, the actual front sight post itself, screws in and out of that thing. If it's wobbly, you can pull it all the way out, and you'll notice a slot in there. You can jam a screwdriver in there to spread it out a little bit, and then sort of retest. Marty, you've got a bunch of great data here that I truthfully didn't know, but one full turn gives you a 7.87 or 20 centimeter raise, a point of impact at 100 meters.
Yeah, it'd be 7.87 inches or 20 centimeters, and that's if you're behind the rifle. You turn it clockwise, and clockwise is going to raise your point of impact. So if you're shooting low, you want to turn it clockwise to adjust your post. And then, of course, counterclockwise lowers your point of impact. So if you're shooting high, then that's going to bring your point of impact down lower. So your front post sight is doing your elevation and your windage. So that rear isn't doing anything other than just adjusting for distance for you.
Yep. And it's pretty clever how they broke that out. It's a very simple system that they have going.
Yeah.
On the rear, a millimeter left or right gives you 10.23 or 26 centimeters impact change at 100 meters.
Which is pretty substantial. So that little bit of movement at 100 meters, which 100 meters is how many yards? It's like
109.4-ish.
Yeah, so less than 110, somewhere between 110 and 109. It's 109, what do you say, 109.4, basically?
Yeah, basically.
So, I mean, 10 inches is big for 1 millimeter of movement, so you don't have to move it left or right very much. So you, I think you were talking about jamming a screwdriver in there, Brian, to to adjust that drum.
No, another part, the part that screws into the drum, the front sight itself, sometimes they're wiggly when you get them from the factory and you don't want them flopping back and forth.
Oh, I got you.
You unscrew it all the way and you'll see that it looks like a tuning fork. And if you jam a screwdriver into that gap, you can widen the tuning fork and that increases the tension and it'll keep your front sight post from flopping around.
Oh, okay. All right. I misunderstood you on that, but that's a good tip. Good tip there. But you don't want to use that screwdriver to adjust your left or your right.
No,
and you'll have a really hard time doing that. That barrel is essentially pressed into the front sight tower with a friction fit. It's actually going to take an enormous amount of effort to move that in or out, left or right, however you want to call it.
And there are tools. So, like Brian said, some AKs come with tools, but those tools generally are just going to adjust your elevation. They're not going to adjust your windage. Now, you can go out and buy aftermarket tools. Tapco has one, a windage and elevation tool for the AK-47 and the SKS. Who was the one that you said, Brian?
X-Tech now has one that's just released and looks very nice, looks well made. I don't know if Tapco is still in business. I keep hearing that they're out of business. And Magnamatic is the other classic one.
Okay,
yeah, for sure.
And then Magnamatic is the one that I hear most people talk about, and it seems to be kind of the standard, the go-to.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I got.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's
just
pretty much what I recommend to use with a tremendous amount of field experience. I'm really confident with that one right now.
Okay.
Same.
Well, we'll just base all our things on using the Magnamatic since that's the one that you've been using, Jay. Just real high level, talk about that tool, what it does, and how to use it.
Basically, that tool will allow you to service whatever you need to do to your AK rifle, period. Whether or not you have something with a standalone front sight, or if you have something that has an integral gas block front sight, the Magnamatic has the flexibility to be able to push that drum, whereas some of the other ones that we've seen in the past just don't have that ability. Once you get through the learning curve with it and understand how small of a movement you're actually going to have to use on that front sight, you're essentially golden. So you can adjust your windage through the drum. Now, a piece of this tool will also allow you to either do service on your front sight post or make elevation adjustments.
Very cool. So a very robust tool, and somewhere around $30, $35. You guys can get this online from various places.
Yep.
I'm looking at their website. They've got it for $35.99 right here.
And they make another one that's a little more involved. That's a little bit more money, and entry level $30-some for sure.
Yeah. Very good. So another component of that front post sight that we didn't talk about are are those called wings? Is that what you're calling those?
I like to call them ears.
The ears. And those are a unit of measurement as well if they're done correctly. I think we found out that in one of our ways to sight it in, that's going to come in handy, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So as far as sights go, I mean, that's pretty much our main components of the basic iron sights on an AK-47, right, guys?
Fundamentally, yes. I mean, there are absolute variations between manufacturers. Some will have a flip-up portion that will enable a night sight to be incorporated into those, but it's not something that's very prolific right now, and it's surely not something that's addressed in the Western market. Eastern market, yes, but in the U.S., we pretty much just swapped that front sight post for something that has a tritium capsule in it. In former comm block countries, they would have a flip up that would also be usable.
Okay, that's very cool. So now let's talk about how you go in. I think that's where I want to go next. How you go in and zero it. So you know the basic parts of that. I guess ammo, we probably should talk a little bit about ammo too. So Pete, talk about the 7.62 ammo that you guys make.
I've always been a big fan of, 7.62 by 39. Being a guy that, works in ballistics all the time, comparing it to the 5.56, I mean, there is in my opinion, a major ballistic advantage to stopping power and, 7.62 by 39 versus, 5.56. Defiant Munitions specializes in a solid copper projectile. What we've done is we designed a 124 grain solid copper expanding projectile, and they expand, over twice the size of the diameter of the bullet easily, and they give wonderful penetration. And we're pushing our load out of like the Occam defense rifle right at 2,400 feet per second. And it just performs very, very well.
Very good. So let's start off with the comm block method of sighting in your AK. So what you're going to want to do is your target needs to be a certain dimension. So your target needs to be a 25 centimeter width by 35 centimeter height at 100 meters. And this goes into those ears that I was talking about earlier on that target. So what you do is you just take your sights and you put them on the bottom of that. You line it up, and then you do your 5 shots. Do you typically recommend 5 shots when you're sighting in? You do a lot.
I do 3 to 5.
Yeah,
it just depends on how I'm feeling.
Yeah, I do 3 to 5 as well.
I mean, if my first 3 shots felt solid, I'll just go with 3.
Okay,
but 3
5
to 5
gives you a good sampling. So 3 to 5, depending on how definitely more than 2, I would think.
This assumes you're on paper already. It depends how good a shooter you are with.
So if you're not on paper, then you're going to have to do something else. If you're hitting the paper, then you can make your adjustments. So with this method, with the comm block method, you take that shot at 100 meters at that 25 by 35 target, and then where your group is, wherever it is on that target, you measure down, and it should be 25 centimeters from where that group is to the bottom of that target, and then you're good. So if it's not, then you make adjustments to where you are. And then, of course, the 35 centimeters up and down goes into your different distances. So once you get it sighted in at the 100 meters, then you can back it up, and then you can test your shots as you go back.
Yeah, I think academically that makes perfect sense, and it's making full advantage of the the mechanisms of the firearm. And I'm sure that probably in a strict martial setting, that's very likely.
And then a thing I forgot is you're going to set it at 300 meters when you do this. So your target's at 100 meters. You're putting your rear sight at 300 meters, and then you're making this shot. And then the 25 by 35 target, do your group, 5-shot group, and then measure down, and then your impact group should be 25 centimeters from the group to the bottom. And once you've established that, then for this method, then that's when it's considered sighted in. Okay?
Right.
And then what they do then from there is then they just move it back to the P. And I think that's something that we didn't mention either. So P on an AK-47 is the same as the 300 meter mark. On an AK-74, the P is equal to the 400 meter mark. So it's a little different on the AK-74. And we're just talking about the AK-47 today. So that's the comm block method if you want to do it that way. And there are targets out there that you can go buy that are specifically made for zeroing in AK-47s. So if you didn't want to buy one and you want to make your own, then just that's your measurements that you use. Do a 25 by 35 centimeter rectangle on a target, and then shoot at that, and that's what you got to go with.
Yeah.
And there's probably 50,000 different ways that people prefer to zero.
For sure.
These are just some ways. This is to get people started. So the comm block method, that's the comm block method. The Western way, or the American way, is for the 7.62 by 3.9. Get a target that's calibrated. Again, you can go get these targets that are calibrated for certain distances for the 7.62 by 3.9 round. You get one for 25 meters. So you set your target 25 meters. You set your rear at 200, the two marks, 200 meters. Do your 5-shot, 3-shot group, whatever you want to do. And then you make adjustments from there on that. And then once you get that adjusted, once you get that sighted in, then you back up to 100 meters. Then you set your rear to 300 meters. You get that sighted in, and once that's sighted in, like Brian was talking about before, move it back to the P, and then just forget about it, and then you're good to go with anything inside 300 meters. And once you're getting outside the 300-meter range, for most of the AKs, you're getting out of their effective range. Would you say, Brian?
Yeah, we can hit stuff at 500 and 700 with our guns, but that doesn't mean you should. The way that I tell people is that if they ever need to shoot a bad guy at 300 meters, I hope they have somebody like Pete with a bolt gun and another guy with a belt fed, because things have gotten very real.
Agreed.
Absolutely. So those are two different ways. I mean, I've simplified it, but that's basically what it is. And there are videos out there that you guys can go and pull up. Like Pete was saying, Travis Haley's got one. He's got a different way that he does his zeroing in. And then another thing that I wanted to mention was those sights sometimes are called the front sights on the AK are sometimes called the Caveman EOTech. Have you guys heard that before?
Negative. Do tell.
Okay, so if you look at it, it's not a complete circle, but if you picture a complete circle and then you've got the front post sight as the center dot, like in an EOTech, then you've got an EOTech dot, and that works for CQB. So when you're 25 or closer, then you're basically just popping that up, and you're using that front post sight as like your Caveman EOTech.
That makes sense.
Yep.
So you're not, looking down the rear sight. You're just popping that up. You're using the front sight as your EOTech, and then putting that on target, and bing, 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 popping your target. So I thought that was kind of cool. I'd never heard it called that either.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get into some of these alternative ways, some other ways that you guys like to sight them in. And Jay, we'll start with you on how you prefer to sight your AK in.
Sighting in the irons, which I have to do kind of frequently with new product samples and new rifles and whatnot. So for the sake of efficiency of time and ammunition, I like to start at 25 and see where I'm at. And when I do that, I'm not a practitioner of using the rear sight leaf hardly at all. Basically, I'll leave it on P, and I just zero there. So from there, I'll basically just put my ears around the center of my target, and I'm essentially just using paper plates or regular printer paper at 25. I don't get into using special targets for that sort of stuff because of volume and whatnot. And I'm also almost always using the same 124 or 122 grain FMJ ammunition anyways. So there's that. Basically what I do is I'll get myself or verified that I'm on paper at 2.5, and then I'll walk it out to 75. And then adjust from there, see where I'm at, and as long as I'm hitting an inch some low at 75, I'll bring it farther out at 100, and then beyond that, I may or may not, depending upon what I'm going to be using that rifle for, I may not then again verify at 200. But as long as I'm 100 and super solid, I know that whatever I'm going to be engaging from 300-ish meters and in, I basically have zero effect. So from there, it's just basically my hold and go from there. Because if I'm zeroed at 2.5 and I'm verified at 100, if I'm going to be shooting something static at a distance beyond 100, I'll adjust my hold onto my target to affect where my round is going. So if I'm going to be engaging something static at 300 to 400 meters, I'll basically lollipop my target. So I'll put my front sight post upper, if we're shooting at a humanoid type target, I'll put my front sight post somewhere around throat level so that my bullet drop will hit at, what we could call center mass-ish, right around there. Or alternatively, if I'm going to be shooting closer, I'll hold front sight post at belt buckle and be going for a gut or center mass shot with that. And that's basically the short theory on how I zero, which is basically just zero adjust direct point of aim.
And your distances are in yards or meters?
Always meters, because I kind of suck at math. So tens work really well for me because they're easy to count.
Very good. Brian, what about you?
I think I probably zero 90% of the rifles that come out of the shop heap or something like that, just because I like seeing what we're building. And so we end up grabbing boxes, like whatever big packing boxes are coming in. If we can get a sheet of cardboard that's 3 feet by 4 feet, I'm really happy. And we'll take shipping labels like that come out of a printer, but basically like a 4x6 card. And I'll just slap those stickers down probably at 1 foot intervals or so. And then I'll put a little dot, like what you would see, the little red dot stickers that you can get for color coding. I'll put one of those in the middle. And so that'll be our setup for 5 or 6 guns pretty easily. And we'll have a spotting scope set up, which is the best $30 that I can ever advise you to get on Amazon. Is just get a dirt cheap spotting scope and you'll love it. And then we do everything at 50, and we have a nice big berm. And I'm trying to put this into the framework of our listeners at home that might not have access to the kind of ranges that we do, where we can just walk out wherever we want at any time. That used to be my big problem when I was a beginning shooter, was having to deal with the standard range for zeroing is an utter friggin' nightmare. So, often though, almost always, except in the case of an indoor range, you've got a berm that you can shoot into. And in the case of the indoor shooter, I'd say start at 25 and everything will be the same. But if you're outdoors on dirt at 50, I'll pick out dirt clumps for the first, 2 or 3 shots and see where I'm printing on the dirt, whether I'm a foot right or left of whatever the clod is. And then I'll make some gross movements to where I'm confident I'm going to get on paper. And then I'll move to a target that's relatively, or in this, for our listeners' case, just pick any target near the middle of this nice big sheet of paper and put down 1 or 2 rounds and look at where they land on the paper and then start making your adjustments. And, we'll go over red dots in a little bit, but for iron sights, the best advice I can give people is, everybody gets turned around about which way to adjust the thing. And the best advice I can give is imagine that the post is never moving, because it's pointing straight at where you want the bullet to go, and you're actually moving the gun underneath the post. It's a bit like looking at a compass. If you've ever done orienteering to a compass, you keep trying to get where north is to change, but really the right way to look at a compass is that the compass rose itself the needle is never moving. You move yourself around it. Same thing on the front sight. Is if you can keep that the front sight post doesn't move and you're moving the gun under it, everything will become simple there. So we'll do, after we're close to the target that we're actually aiming for, I will take that 3-shot group and make an adjustment. And at 100 yards, if you've got or 100 meters, with a 10% error, I'm just not concerned. So I actually don't. The scientist in the room doesn't care about the difference between meters and yards. So I'll just make, if you have we'll talk red dots later, but there's conversions that we should talk about between 50 yards and 100 yards for red dots. But in the case of the irons, Lefty already gave you guys the prescription there. So if you need to move 5 inches left or right on the drum there, you're gonna want to move 0.5 millimeter. So basically, you're just gonna take that sight adjustment tool and bump it basically just until you feel it move, and then try again. And I can't get much more precise than that. Is that I just try and really just nudge it a little bit, test, retest, keep doing, iterating in until you're good to go. And that spotting scope is going to save you so much time doing this. Like if I was at a public range, I wouldn't go there without a spotting scope in my hand, because it'll take you 8 hours.
Yeah, definitely. Spotting scopes are worth their weight in gold, especially if you're just paying $30 for them. So get one. Invest in one of those.
It's a lot of shooter input too, People dicking around trying to chase this goddamn hole in the paper, and it's actually them just mashing a trigger.
Yeah, let me wrap, or Jay, why don't you wrap on that for a minute? But if you can't shoot a group, don't start zeroing, basically. Yeah, like maybe you can go over getting some sandbags and getting comfy, and that your resting point of aim, your natural point of aim comes back to the same place at the exhalation. Right. All that nonsense. You're totally right. You don't have any business until you can shoot a group.
Right, because there was a time in my younger, prettier days when I was a really excellent precision shooter, but I'm old, fat, and ugly now, and I can't shoot the way that I used to shoot. So now I know basically where it is that's going to be the best that I'm going to be able to do, basically in the moment. And that now becomes my common average, particularly for these types of rifles.
Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to make sure that our listeners understood, I didn't want to take it for granted, but I did, is the shooting position, Brian. When you brought that up, is you don't want to have an unstable rifle when you're shooting. So you want to get a good, comfortable shooting stick or brace or something to brace the handguard in, not the barrel. You don't want to rest your barrel down on anything, because that's going to mess with your harmonics. But you want to do it around the handguard area, and just get good and comfortable to where the rifle isn't moving. So you want to keep your rifle as stable as possible when you're zeroing. So don't do this standing. Don't throw it up on a brick wall or something like that. With the barrel. Get a good, nice, comfortable position, whether it's prone or you're sitting at a shooting table or whatever that may be.
Yeah, and that really cannot be overstated. Travis Haley, I watched him at a class that I took. He was demonstrating in prone, which is comfortable with him. I have some neck issues where prone is almost impossible for me. So what I'm about to say is the same for bench rest shooting, but Travis spends about 5 minutes getting comfortable on the ground. And he'll drop down quick as, he's super fast, but then he kind of looked like a sand crab trying to dig into the sand to hide. He kept shimmying his body around. He was digging in footholds with his boots. And these guys, it's really worth watching a high precision shooter get ready to shoot. And it is like, it makes a dog circle in the dog bed look like, the fastest thing around. They really take their time to get comfy. And maybe Pete, since he's the pro in the room, can give us a little sermon on that.
Yeah, I was going to say what I typically do in practice when I'm getting ready to zero any rifle. And if you could see it more in a scoped rifle over a red dot or over an iron sight gun. But what I typically do is I get into position, get comfortable, get a solid rest, and then I'll break the trigger on a dry chamber, half a dozen times or more. And if I see movement in my crosshair, my sights, my red dot, you're not there. So I will keep doing that, shifting my stuff around until I'm getting no movement out of the rifle when my trigger breaks. Like I said, you could see it more in a scoped rifle, but then it's harder to see in, iron sights, but, maybe pick a closer target so you could see the movement a little bit more, before you start shooting. So I'll take, half a dozen or more, dry shots, just to make sure I'm, set before I start shooting.
Yeah, definitely good tips right there to get the most out of your zeroing. If you're going to take the time to do it, you don't want to cut corners. You want to do it right, and you want your you want your rifle as accurate as possible, because this is going to be your life and death sometimes tool, and you're going to want it to work and want it to work accurately. So let's talk about red dots. Let's go down the red dot path, Brian. Now, there are some AKs that won't allow you to do, to mount certain things, and you've got to get aftermarket accessories and maybe switch some parts out and get rails on there. If you're using a red dot, what's something that you want to keep in mind when picking out a red dot for your AK-47?
The biggest, there's what cost bracket you're going to pop into. They all cost about the same per year of use. With one exception that I'm aware of. And what I mean by that is that a Bushnell red dot costs about $60 or $70, and it'll last about a year. And an aim point costs $600 to $700 and comes with a 10-year warranty. And so the cost of ownership is pretty much identical. The one exception that I would speak of that's in there are these Holosun red dots. We've had extraordinarily good luck with them, and they're about $200, and that's what we shoot. On our Instagram channel, you'll see some pretty crazy targets, and we shoot all those on a $200 Holosun that's on an Arms 31 low mount. And so, that's my favorite optic right now. But cost and weatherproofing and battery life are certainly issues to keep in mind. The battery life, on the Holosuns and on the aim points is very good. The MRO is also pretty good. The MRO has a fair amount of parallax. If you test the parallax, when you get off angle by more than a little bit, you'll watch it kind of fall off a cliff. So it's just something to be aware of. And I like some sort of co-witnessing with the red dot to the irons. And it's mostly just so that your natural point of aim stays the same whether you're using irons or red dots. If an optic breaks, it's usually because it fogs or gets mud on it, not because the battery went dead. So when you guys are gaming out your scenarios for when the zombies march, you really do need a QD mount. That's critical on any piece of electronic equipment, is that you can get rid of it, because they do fail. I think that's about it for the high level red dot comments that I have.
One question I have for you, and it has to go with the mount. You're talking about low mounts with a red dot on an AK. Those are lower than on an AR. You're going to have to get them lower than on an AR, and there are specific mounts out there that will allow you to do that for some red dots. Some red dots don't have the mounts for it.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's one reason why you don't see a lot of people running around with, help me out, what Big Army uses. The big clunky red dots that look like something out of Star Wars.
The CL ones or ML ones?
The general brand, the ones that had all the Tempco problems, the temperature drift
EOTech?
EOTech. You don't see a lot of EOTech on AKs because the height over bore is kind of gnarly. It doesn't mean that you can't. It's just that you don't see a lot of them. The height over bore on an AK is 2 inches on a stock AKM. The normal height over bore for an AR-15 or M16, whatever, that family is like 2.6 to 2.7 inches. And so you got like 3/4 of an inch difference there that you got to make up for. And there's no real native, the way there's a flat top forged upper for an AR, there really isn't for the AK. And so, that's a big focus of what we do here, is to get that as low as possible. And with the setup that I just mentioned on our rifles, the height over bore is sitting at 2.4 inches using those low mounts. So it's kind of halfway between an AR and an AK. The Ultimac and some of those railed gas tubes will get you into that 2-inch height over bore with a 50%. Something like an Ultimac or some of the other railed gas tubes out there, which are an option, you can get that 2-inch height over bore co-witness. And when we say 50% co-witness, that just means that the red dot and the top of the front sight post are right on top of each other. And on a lower 1/3 co-witness, that's when the irons are in the lower 1/3 of the red dot window. I tend to prefer lower 1/3 because I like less junk in my way. But I generally also like people to have the same natural point of aim between the systems. So the setup that I'm currently running is 50% co-witness.
Nice. And what did you say you're using, a Holosun?
Yeah, one of the $200 Holosuns. I forget the exact model number, but another thing to look out for if you're over 35 or so is to not get the Holosuns or probably any red dot that has a reticle. A red dot reticle, because astigmatism creeps in starting in 30s, early 40s, and that makes that crosshair look awful. It's just one big blur. And at least with the dot, you get the same kind of effect with the dot. It'll turn into an hourglass or a slash or something. As long as you pick one corner of that slash, you're okay. But when it comes to those big reticles for older folks, I haven't met anybody over 40 who likes those things. But for you young bucks out there, rock on.
Until I got my mine corrected, I couldn't use a red dot at all. I mean, they were just all over the place. Pretty much useless. I'm
slightly over 40, and I guess I've been blessed to have perfect vision. But yeah, I run aim points with the. I found that the factory aim point mount works well for me. It's not a quick detachable. You got to use a T15 wrench to get it off. But I haven't found anything lower, as low as that mount to use. I don't have any experience with the Holosuns. Like I said, I've
got experience with the ride-on, and I know, Brian, you got a little bit of experience with it also. But as far as the height, those work good.
Yeah, those all of those are knockoffs of the aim point mount. And so this ARMS, ARMS, it stands for like Atlantic Research Marketing Services or something weird like that. But ARMS, the number 31 is the same height as the aim point non-QD mount. And remind me after the show, Pete, and we'll get you squared away on one of those.
I'm writing that down right now.
Wait.
So there's different ways to mount them. You were talking about Umarex has one, the gas barrel mount. There's side mounts. If you've got that attachment where you can put like a Midwest Industries or I think UTG, even UTG makes those side mounts to where it's going to go over the dust cover. And then there are companies such as yourself, Brian, that have a rear sight replacement that has rails on it.
Yep. We sell one that's a single piece pick rail plus rear notch. That if you want to keep your gun stock, that's the simplest possible solution. There are other companies which make very fine mounts that are similar. I guess Fred Stetcher's his name. Really nice guy. Help me out, somebody.
Saberworks.
Thank you.
Saberworks.
Yep. So they have a really neat system that's where you can swap out different rails up top or sights. We also, did something with our rail that gets you out all this stuff as well, where you can just start running whatever you want on top. It's the equivalent of the forged flat top upper for an AR-15, where we just have a unitary rail running down the whole length of the gun. There's a couple other companies doing that as well. trying to think of other good. The Ultimac is the old classic. They're kind of the first ones with the gas tube.
Mm-hmm.
There's advantages and disadvantages to one of those. So they do get very hot. So don't plan on if your fingers have a tendency to wrap around to the top of the gun, that's not going to be a good time for you. They also depend on the journal, the outside diameter of the barrel being exactly correct to the AKM spec. If it's not, it won't work right. But that's the one that 4 screws and you're in the game. And so awful hard to argue with. Just there's a lot of good solutions for folks depending on what they want. And our options require a fair amount of dedication, and others you can just try out in an afternoon. So it really depends.
So let me ask you guys your opinion on co-witnessing. How important is it that your red dot or scope co-witness with your irons? I'll let Jay go first.
All right. Well, I'm going to circle back to stigmatisms for a second.
Okay.
Which is going to provide the answer why it is that I require co-witnessing of my red dot with my irons. Is that I have found recently that if I have a rear sight that I can see through with better than 1/3 lower co-witness, that it is actually changing the focal length that my right eye that has the astigmatism needs to correct the stigmatism. So looking through my aim point, what used to look like an asterisk has now returned to a for real normal aim point picture, as long as I'm looking through a good rear sight first. And it's changing my focal length on my eye and correcting my stigmatism and returning that red dot to what it should have been. That's my personal primary reason why it is that I insist on running co-witnessing irons with my red dot, and that applies to my ARs as well as my AKs. The other reason that I like to insist that iron sights are totally visible through my optic is that I insist in my training programs for myself and with my students that everybody maintain a level of proficiency with iron sights, period.
Very good.
So
is it possible to have a red dot not co-witness and still be able to function the rifle properly, accurately? And then, like you say, if the red dot goes off, if you got a QD, you just pop it off, and then you go to your irons as long as your irons are zeroed in.
I don't see any reason that would be prohibited unless the optics mount that you're choosing to mount your red dot to gets rid of your rear sight, which is one of the cool things about Brian's product, is that it maintains a sight picture So there's that. So if you have to strip off your optic and still go fight, you still basically have something to index your front sight off of. So as long as you maintain that ability, I think that you're totally good to go. But in the chances or likelihood that you're in a fight and you've got to strip an optic off, you should probably be going to a secondary.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, people tend to get very comfortable in today's technology with electronic sights, and I absolutely agree with Jay on what you said there. I've been in classes where iron sights are completely foreign to them, and it's like, all right, let's dump your optic and see what happens, and they really don't have a clue. I think a person needs to become very proficient on iron sights before you move to an electronic sight, because the sights do fail. It's very rare, but I was just at the range just the other day, and I had my aim point. The battery went dead in it. It went dead from the time I left my shop to the time I went to the range. So I mean, it does happen.
It does. It happens to me a lot.
Yeah, stuff gets dropped, broken. I've smoked out an aim point on one of my crinks that was running an Ultimac rail. I've smoked one out to where it didn't work anymore. So a person needs to know how to run their iron sights and run them proficiently, because Murphy's Law says that shit's going to happen at the worst of time.
Absolutely.
Facts.
To loop back around what Jay was saying, for those of you thinking that, or for those who might be thinking he's blowing smoke about the lens effect, that's a very real thing. And I didn't understand what was going on for a while, because I noticed the same effect with our Merc rail and the peep sights that we make for it. I was getting really good focus on my front sight post using the tiny peep aperture. And then until I realized what I had done, which is you're making a pinhole camera, which is a very primitive lens. And you'll notice folks with failing eyesight, they will make a little hole with their thumb and pointer finger and look through that when they don't have their glasses, and they get the same thing. And so the way Jay is setting up his irons is really savvy and highly recommended.
Yeah. And I want to talk about the peep sights, but we're going to do that in a minute.
And if you want to see the proof in the pudding on changing your focal length, you take your fingers and you make like a little itty bitty hole thing, and you bring it up to your eye, and you can find the focal length and that yep, just like, yep, look at you.
So I'm putting my index finger to my thumb on both hands and then putting them together and making like a little square.
I like Pete's better.
Pete.
Pete's better. Right, but that'll allow you to figure out what the distance of your focal length actually needs to be, and if you really want to nerd out, you can find the maximum distance and then set your red dot wherever that measurement actually is. But that's some significantly nerd shit that I like to get all up in.
Yeah. So is that you guys good on the red? I think we covered red dots pretty good here. I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the biggest thing is, use what I found. What I tell people a lot is use what makes sense to you. Know your rifle, and if you don't know it well enough, you need to shoot it more.
Absolutely, and everybody needs to shoot it more. Even I need to shoot it more.
And if you're still not good after it, even after you've shot it more, then you need to go find somebody to teach you how to shoot your stuff the right way.
Correct. Absolutely. Get training.
Get training. Like buy good stuff, but buy more training.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Always train. Never stop training.
All day, every day.
And our next episode of the Talking Lead podcast, it may come out before this. I don't know. We're actually going to talk about in this time of social distancing and quarantining, things that you can do to train at home without ammo and stay proficient. So that's coming up if you haven't already heard it yet. Let's go to scopes real quick. Probably real easy to talk about as far as scopes go on AK-47s. It's all going to be scope dependent on how you go and sight that in. Jay, I'm going to let you cover that real quick.
Just real quickly, depending upon what your intended purpose actually is, will probably have a lot to do with what kind of optic you're going to be slapping on top of your rifle, which in most cases, from my experience, is going to be some variety of low power variable optic, and generally within the 1.4, 1.6, occasionally 1.8 for the ambitious and heavily pocketed. And depending upon how you are going to be mounting that, will greatly determine what your actual output is going to be with that rifle.
Now there are scopes that are calibrated for the 7.62 by 3.9 round. And if you get one of those, then your adjustments are going to be a lot easier. But if you're throwing an AR scope, 5.56 scope on a AK-762 with 3.9, you're going to have to make adjustments in those measurements. Talk about that, Pete, as far as ballistics and scopes go.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is it really comes down to, even if you have a ballistic reticle, say for 7.62 by 39, you need to find out exactly what that reticle's set up for, because say it's set up for, the Red Army standard 124 FMJ, and you're shooting Defiance, solid copper self-defense load, it's going to be different. Maybe slightly, but it's going to be somewhat different. But I always thought that those, ballistic reticles, unless, you're going to shoot, exactly what that's set up for, they'll get you in the range. They'll get you MOA of man, or minute of man. But the biggest thing is, being able to shoot those and knowing where you're going to print.
Yeah. And those are the same way you're going to sight in, your iron sights. Start off short, exactly, and then work your way out, and then make the adjustments as you go, based on the manufacturer's recommendations.
Yeah, and the biggest difference with those reticles, you're going to see, depending on what load they're set up for, at the further distances, 200 and 300 yards, is where you're going to see a little bit of impact difference. Depending on how different the load is from what that reticle is set up to.
Yeah, the further out you go, the bigger variation you're going to get.
And Pete, I don't want you to necessarily name the other companies when you called me about that data the other day, but would you mind speaking a little bit about just variations gun to gun on the same load? Sorry about that.
Yeah. You mean the velocity difference between the Occam and some of the other rifles that we shot?
Yeah, and how that affects BDC. Because or maybe I can just wrap on it a little bit, because I might be just, there can be significant differences in muzzle velocity from gun to gun, right? And,
yeah, absolutely.
And that directly impacts what the bullet drop compensation needs to be, right? The slower the bullet, the faster it's going to drop. Not the faster, but all bullets drop at the same rate. And if they're moving horizontally at a lower speed, the effect is that they're going to drop more than, obviously, guns that shoot faster shoot flatter, right?
Yep.
And correct. So, it really is about knowing your specific gun, your specific serial number, and getting dope off that.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. Like Brian was saying, we were out at the range. I think, I got 4 different 14.5 AKs. And then the Occam rifle, the 1775, that was the 5th that we had tested. And the velocity difference between all those rifles was considerable. I mean, now when I say considerable, 60 feet per second, 75 feet per second, maybe between all of them. But that's enough to make an impact difference at, 300 meters. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, really what it comes down to is make it simplistic, shoot your rifle, know what it's doing, and know that you can make 300 meter hits, and what it's going to do from 25 yards to 300 meters. Like we said just a few minutes ago, it's vitally important.
One other thing that I want to add also is that a cold barrel will shoot slower than a hot barrel. So the hotter your barrel gets, the faster your round's going to be also. So, by the time you've shot it and got it zeroed in, your barrel's hot, you've zeroed it in on a hot barrel. If you go out 3 weeks later and then you shoot that same rifle, then right out of the gate, you're not going to get that zero. You got to warm it up a little bit. Am I wrong in that?
In precision rifle stuff, typically what I do is I don't get too wrapped around that. I shoot both. I like to see, the difference in cold, in hot. Now, in my opinion, you're not going to see a major impact shift until you get really hot. I guess it just depends on what firearm you're shooting. But as an AK, I would mainly focus, on, a colder bore shot, I guess. 5 rounds isn't going to make a difference in impact, in my opinion. Probably not even, barely 20. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to be said about that.
Okay. Very good. And then anybody else, any final points before we go to our questions? Nope. Okay. Good enough. Let's go to our questions now. I made a post on social media a little bit before we started this. I'm sure there'll be a lot more come in after we get done recording, so I apologize for the late post. But let's go to Facebook, and I'm just going to go through here one by one. We may have already answered some of these, but if you guys want to elaborate on them, feel free to do that. See, Pierce Taylor's got several here. Mounting optics on a railed gas tube, does it really get too hot if I'm not going to do some kind of torture test on the gun?
In my opinion, the answer is no. I mean, when I smoked out that aim point on that crink, I mean, I was doing an extreme high volume of shooting. It's going to take a lot of ammo to get that sucker hot enough.
Okay. Thoughts on adjustable gas block piston for suppression? I just ordered the KNS adjustable piston for mine. Anyone familiar with that?
Yeah. They absolutely work. Yeah,
I'm not familiar with them.
The one caveat I'll give is that they absolutely work if you're rocking a standard AK. Our guns are tuned differently, and so we've run into issues where our guns aren't gassed enough. Those leak a lot of gas on purpose, and so you may have to bore up your gas port a little bit if you're working with like a Rifle Dynamics gun or one of ours to get them to cycle well. I believe there might be a cup that I think they make 2 different styles of cup. The typical KNS has a gas piston that the front face of it has a big void, or what I call a cup, in it, and that serves to soften the recoil and take a lot of piss out of the gas. For us, that's way too much, and I think they make a flat-faced version as well that does work. I haven't played with it, but that'd be the only caveat. I've heard great things. I've heard of a couple breaking early on, but it sounds like they've gotten that worked out.
Okay. J. Edgar Paradox on Instagram says, I'm very interested in hearing this. Are there any discrepancies in the process of zeroing a traditional AK-47 and 7.62-39 versus other calibers, starting distance, sight settings, and so on? I mean, as far as the procedure goes, I wouldn't think there's any difference in procedure, but as far as your measurements and whatnot go, it gets into your ballistics, right, Pete?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you need to know what caliber you're going to be shooting. You need to have a general idea what the ballistics are going to do out of that rifle. Do you need to geek out and figure out exactly, down to the millimeter? No, but you need to have a general idea of what that's going to do downrange. But the procedures would be the same as what we talked about,
Okay. Let's see. Basti Grub says, I would like to know about the 400-meter zero of the 5.45 and Russian optics. Are they worth it? Prisms, not red dots. Or stick to Western optics. Jay.
The prism optics, I think he's referring to the collimators, which are interesting creatures unto themselves. That's really a preference issue. I mean, I own a couple of them, and they work great. You have to get your manuals translated into English so that once again, circling back on your own personal data package, so that you know exactly what you're doing and why it's doing it. That's a challenge, but the internet's awesome. So, whether or not it's functionally better, I don't think that it's anything more than personal preference, whether you want to run something, comm block, or you want to run something Western. It's entirely personal choice there.
Yeah. I personally prefer the Western optics just because they're easier to get and I can understand them. So.
Battery, service, warranty, accessibility. I like those things. So But I own some weirder, things too.
What's the weirdest thing you own, Jay? I guarantee you own some pretty crazy stuff, unique stuff.
I wouldn't even really call it too weird. I mean, working at Century, I get to shoot some pretty interesting stuff. And we had a couple years ago, we had some of those rather large, funny Gen 1 night vision optics that came packaged with I think some Polish rifles. I think they were Polish rifles with Polish night vision.
PSLs kind of rifle?
No. These were AKMs. These were AKMs. These were 16-inch. We had to manufacture batteries for them because they worked off a different voltage. It wasn't that crazy. It was like either 3 or 6 volts, something like that. It wasn't that challenging, but that was pretty neat. Pretty neat.
Cool. All right, so this one we've pretty much answered through several. I mean, there's several different answers for this. Tandem Dooley wants to know, what is the distance recommended for zero on the standard 7.62 by 3.9, and what distance should we confirm zero at? So I think we went through several different opinions on that.
I think so too.
Yeah. So
that's all.
Rewind to the first of the show.
Yeah, and then just to touch on it again, I mean, it's really, this is personal theory here, is that you have to take into consideration what your engagement distance are actually going to be, and work from there. Because I like to have direct solid hits at 100 meters and in.
Yeah, definitely. And I've talked about this on prior episodes, Brian. Is the 1775, the ODS, once I get it, I'm going to use it it's going to be an all-purpose rifle, my APS, but my main purpose is hunting. I want to take it out. I really want to put it through a good hunting season. And, I'm going to put it through the iron sight zeroing. I'm going to zero those iron sights on that. But then whatever scope I decide that I want on it, which I don't know yet until I get it and try a couple of different ones on it, then my zeroing will be based on that.
Yeah, that sounds great. And that's actually the biggest argument that I could make for something like a BDC reticle is hunting there, just because you have a little more presence of mind. But yeah, there's just doping in. Like, I've got a pretty good Kentucky windage just from having, if you have the ability to shoot from 0 to 300 with steel, or just setting up targets, you get a real good idea what your holdover needs to be. And just to the degree, I know it's hard for a lot of folks to find a spot where they can even shoot out to 300. So in more urban areas, that's a serious challenge. However, it's worth the exercise to do. I'm going to second that recommendation of Pete's with the Travis Haley shooting story video, where you literally start. It's a great video, and you just start from 25 meters and work back to 300. And then he just shifts his zero based on how each individual gun is shooting. And holy cow, the variation is enormous, to where he'll move a zero up and down to minimize the error across all those three or 4 or 6 differences. And so, if you've got a chunk of BLM land and a day, doing shooting stories takes about, it'll take the better part of a day to really get that right, but you will learn so much on the far side of it.
Yeah. All right, next and last question. We're going to get this one from Facebook. It comes from Brad Reynolds. And Brad says, what are your thoughts on replacing the rear leaf sight with a peep sight? Does it help with sight picture? And we touched on that a little bit, and that'll get into the peep sights that I want you to talk about, Brian.
Yeah, sure. So we just came out with our own PH1 sights. They are an iron peep sight. They work very much like those on an AR-15. We find the peep sight to be, I'm sure I'm going to make some people's heads explode here, but I think peep sights are massively better than the open notch design on the AK. For those magnification reasons we were talking about, you actually have a lens there that's helping you, and so use that sucker. And so, yeah, they have 4 different apertures. There's one that's really big, that's just a ghost ring. And then there's one that's, gosh, it's probably 1 millimeter in diameter. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it is tiny, and its magnification is much greater. And so we shoot sub 2 MOA with those all day long. And so peep sights in general, I'm a giant fan of.
Yeah, I need to buy a set of those for me, Brian.
Yeah, I'd love to get you one.
Put me down. I'm gonna order one too.
Good deal. Yeah, we're shipping those tomorrow. They're getting driven down to our shop today, right? As we speak.
Very nice.
And we're recording this on April 13th.
Mm-hmm. It'll be dropping in 2 days from now. So the 15th, we'll be dropping this the 5th. So as you guys listen to this, it's the 15th. Those will be available. You can go to Brian's website.
OccamDefense.com. And they will work we're actually testing them today on a SCAR and an AR-15 to see how they feel, because they're a little lower. So if you like low height over bore for a SCAR or an AR, they're probably going to be a really good fit for you. They're lower than a stock, than a regular Magpul MOE, backup iron sight set.
Awesome.
Very cool. All right, guys. I think that's a good introduction into the basics of how to zero your AK-47 with the iron sights, and some good tips on red dots and scopes, and some mounts too. We got into mounts. We've talked about mounts in some of the previous episodes, so go back and listen to those, and you'll get some golden nuggets in every episode of the Talking Lead AK Corner. This is our Season 2, so if you haven't checked out Season 1 yet, make sure you go back. We had 12 episodes in Season 1. We're going to be doing 12 episodes this season. We're over the halfway mark with Episode 7 with this episode. So lots more coming up. If you guys have questions, if you've got topics, if you got people that you want us to have on the show, shoot me an email, talkingled@gmail.com, and in the subject put AK Corner suggestion, question, something along those lines, so it'll be easy for me to point out, and we'll do our best to make that happen. But now, like in every episode, Brian and Jay, it's time for a giveaway. So one lucky AK Corner listener is going to win 500 rounds of Red Army Standard ammunition, 7.62 by 3.9 from Century Arms. And we're going to take our possible winners from the questions that I just read. So we've got, let me read everybody's name here. Pierce Taylor from Facebook. We've got Brad Reynolds from Facebook. We've got Basti.Grub on Instagram. We've got J. Edgar Paradox, and we've got Tandem Dooley. So I need one of you guys, Pete or Jay or Brian, to pull up a random number generator, and we've got 1 through 5 here. Now, did you guys post these questions on your sites? Do you have any questions on your sites that we need to read before we do this? I want to give everybody an opportunity. I know it was short, but as of this recording, these are the names that we have so far. So if you got in after this, I'm sorry.
I don't have any. I didn't get it up in time.
Yep,
that's what she said.
Negligent guard as well.
Okay, we'll run with these 5 then. These are 5 good ones, good loyal listeners.
Hey, the odds are good.
So 500 rounds of Red Army Standard 7.62 by 3.9. And go, Brian.
All right. You got to make your best random number generator sound lefty. There you go. Okay, that made it work. Number 4.
Number 4 is JEP. JEP would be Jason Edgar Paradox. This was the one on Instagram. He asked, I'm very interested in hearing, are there discrepancies in the processes of zeroing traditional AKs versus other rounds? So that was his question, and that got you 500 rounds there, J. Edgar. So shoot me an email, talkingled@gmail.com. Let me know that you are the winner of Season 2, Episode 7's 500 rounds. You must be eligible. If you're not eligible, then you'll get some Century Arms swag, T-shirts, hats, something along those lines. And then the ammo is going to go to me. No, we'll give it to somebody. But I'm pretty sure Jay Edgar's won before or some other stuff, so I think he's in one of those free states. Thank God. All right, guys, that was a great show. I appreciate you taking the time to be on, Pete, joining us from, I don't think we got what part of the country you're in. Where you at?
Sturgis, South Dakota.
South Dakota. Yeah. And you're getting some snow up there still, right?
Yeah, we got, like I said, it was like 70 degrees 2 days ago, and then we got like 18 inches. So it's cold and miserable now. So, I mean, I was just at the range with the Occam defense rifle 2 days ago. Wasn't it 2 days ago? Something like that. Anyways, it was gorgeous out, and now it's not so gorgeous.
We're not getting the snow, but the temperature did drop to the 30s last night here in Tennessee, where it had been in the high 70s. I mean, just peaking at 80s here. Just beautiful weather. Everything started blooming. And then I think the whole world got rained on last night. I looked at the radar, and that system was worldwide. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, we got snow. So,
but Brian's sitting pretty, from what I understand, in Idaho. Idaho's got great weather right now.
Yeah. We're very lucky right now.
Very good.
We've had our share of snow this year, that's for certain.
Yeah, but you're still working. Business is as usual. You guys are cranking out AKs. You're cranking out the lubes. You're cranking out all the stuff, right?
Yeah, lube is held up because a bunch of our parts come from China unavoidably. I want to make T-shirts that say F China on them, but I'm trying to hold I got enough to do without that, but I'm so over doing business with China. Yeah. So, yeah. Let's see, and we're down some guys because we use a bunch of intern labor from the local university, which is closed down. But, yeah, we haven't shut down for a single day. We're still cranking out guns. We got 30 guns in work in process right now. So, and one of them's yours, Marty. So we will be over quite shortly here.
Can't wait. You don't know how much my bit is almost chomped in half.
You've been more than patient.
I've been chomping on it. I'm excited, man. I'm excited to get it. I can't wait to shoot it.
Yeah.
And then of course Century Arms is as busy as ever. Jay,
we're busy. Always open.
Busy, always open. Gun sales are at a record high. Never been higher, I don't think. But they're still available. There's still guns out there. There's still ammo out there. It may not be the price you want, but it's still available. It's still out there. And the people, like we said in previous episodes, that were scrambling to get it right now were the ones that they weren't us. We've got our ammo. We've had our ammo for a while. So
yep.
Be prepared.
To all you Democrats who have joined the gun movement, welcome. We're happy to have you.
Right. Exactly. The recent statistics are that 1/5 of all households went out and bought a gun last month.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's great. Absolutely love it.
So
hopefully there'll be a lot of opinions changed.
Welcome to the Republic. We're glad to have you.
Yep.
Likewise, yeah.
And Pete, give everybody your website contact info where they can get in touch with you and the products that you're offering.
Yeah, check me out at defiantmunitions.com. We'd love to have you as a customer. Like I said, we specialize in, ultra high end, Rolls Royce type solid copper defensive ammo. Our prices have not went up since we started shipping, and I don't foresee a price increase. But like I said, we specialize in super high end self-defense ammo. So our prices, our AK ammo that we're about to drop is going to be a little bit more expensive than, regular, like the Red Army standard and stuff like that. But you're getting true self-defense, high accuracy, ammo. And, but yeah, check me out, and I'd love to have you guys, and I appreciate you guys having me on the show.
Now, one question: Are you specifically doing the self-defense ammo, or are you doing any kind of hunting precision rounds also?
All of our solid copper line works great for hunting. We actually did some inner city calling in a neighboring town to me with our 62 grain TCX. Our TCX line stands for total copper expanding with an X. and they work phenomenal. The same goes with the 124 grain TCX and the 7.62. It'll work phenomenal with any hunting application. We have not come out with any kind of range practice type ammo yet, probably foreseeable in the future. But right now I'm just, specializing in your high-end self-defense and / hunting ammunition right now. So when you were talking about, being able to hunt with the 7.62 by 39, I mean, our load would be, perfect for that.
Awesome. I'll have to get some of that then.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to send you some.
Very good. And then, of course, Occam Defense is occamdefense.com.
That is correct.
On the Instagrams and the Facebooks?
I think it's Occam Defense Solutions on the gram and Facebook. And something, if you just Google Occam Defense, search Occam Defense in YouTube, you'll find our videos there as well. But we answer questions mostly on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I occasionally check in on, but the place to directly interact with me, Brian, is Instagram.
Yeah, and I love it because Brian posts manufacturing videos, through the process. So if you're interested in seeing an AK being made, he goes through and shows you some of those manufacturing processes. It's very cool. Jay, Century Arms, centuryarms.com.
Centuryarms.com. And also check us out at uspalm.com and canicusa.com.
There you go. And, of course, US Palm making those awesome magazines, those AK-47 magazines and grips. Are you guys still stocked on those?
Grips.
Are you sold out of those too? Just kidding.
We're still manufacturing them.
I know you
machines are running now.
Can't keep up with the demand. It's crazy.
Always working.
Very good. And then, of course, again, you guys have any questions, comments about the show, guests you want to have, topics you want us to cover, talkingled@gmail.com, talkingled AK Corner in the subject, and we'll get those done. So until next month, comrades, hopefully this COVID-19 BS will be done and over with, and life will be getting closer to normal, although it's going to take a minute.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The one other thing, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
When I was talking about the loads, we'll also be working on a subsonic load for 7.62 by 39 as well.
Oh, nice.
I know there's been several questions about that, and that is definitely something we're going to do. I have the ability to make a solid copper bullet that will expand well below subsonic velocities, so people will still be able to use a true subsonic load in a hunting application or self-defense application. So that'll be pretty cool. I don't know anybody in the industry that's been able to accomplish that, and we'll definitely be doing that. So.
What our listeners cannot see is all of us just writhing in ecstasy for the arrival of this round. We can't. It's impossible to be more excited about something than this. Yeah,
that's huge news.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We'll
have you back on once you get that out, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I look forward to it.
Very good. Again, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to be on. And until next time, Leadheads, go back, listen to the previous episodes, get caught up if you're not caught up yet. And we'll be back next month with more of the Talking Lead AK Corner presented by Century Arms and Occam Defense.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.